Hi there, and welcome back to the Rangers News YouTube channel. It's Jordan here alongside Cammy.
How you doing?
And we're just going to talk in our final video for the week about there's been a lot of stuff in the press recently, a lot of controversy around the club and around Scottish football and around tabloids. And sort of in the wake of that, Club 1872 came out and talked about, the rise and prominence of fan media. And we're just going to talk about sort of the differences and the pros and cons of your fan-led media versus your mainstream stuff. What are your thoughts on this?
I thought it was interesting that they raised that point. I think that a lot of Rangers fans were discussing it because traditional media outlets, I think, have been giving the team a hard time, but not so much as a whole from the traditional outlets, other than perhaps maybe BBC Scotland. But there's been individuals that have been given platforms to discuss controversial issues surrounding Rangers and not always give the club a fair deal, and have been quite raw, and at times have discussed complete fantasy. I can understand why fans are frustrated, because it creates an atmosphere around Rangers and around the support that somewhat demonises the support at times. It demonises the club at times. It creates a lot of scowling. It creates a negative atmosphere for something that so many people love and enjoy. For it to be so routinely berated and put down and used as a kind of tool to whip people with, I think that it says quite a lot about the culture in Scotland. But what in Club 1872's comments, they were talking mostly about the commercial revenue that these organisations are drawing from it, and the fact that because they're given a kind of platform for people to come out and negatively discuss and attack the club perhaps should reconsider feeding them stories, giving them information, or giving them access to the club. And I think that it's a very fair point. I think in it as well, they says that it would be undesirable to ban press outlets. And I agree with that. I don't think that there should be much room for that. I think that you need balance, etc. And I think that's where the debate with fan media becomes interesting, because if fan media, I think that Rangers News could be considered a fan media. I know that we have journalism qualifications and we like to operate as professional journalism at times. But
not always within that space.
Yeah. They don't want fan media to become a sounding board or a foghorn for the club. You want it still to be able to criticise the club when the time is right. You want it to have that balance, but on the other side, traditional media has created such a negative feeling around Rangers that supporters are turning away and they're moving to other outlets, and they're enjoying the coverage from other outlets more because they feel that, ironically, it's more fair and balanced than traditional media. And I think it's something to be considered. I don't think that a massive overhaul would be good for any club in any part of the world. I think that you still need the traditional central media to be involved, simply because it offers that balance, and it can't always be Rangers voices leading it. But I do think that it would be quite a pioneering approach, or a quite a progressive approach, if Rangers were to consider using more fan-led media to provide the right kind of coverage that entertains, informs and educates fans in the right way, that doesn't get them into a tizzy, that doesn't deliberately set out to berate them through political agendas or just like negative spin. And I think that it's an interesting debate.
Yeah, I think the commercial side to things, when you're talking about columnists coming in and writing stuff, which really when you strip it all back and you look at it, they're trying to be controversial and succeeding, and they succeed by enraging fans with some of the stuff that they say is, has been said in recent times about specific players and that sort of thing. It's not okay, it's not acceptable, the sort of sweeping statements and stuff they come out with. But the reason they're doing it is because, everyone says, look, times are tight, papers are dying. it gets massive online traffic for them to bring a guy in. I think it speaks volumes that the people who've written these columns do not get sacked or do not get suspended afterwards, because what they've produced is exactly what they wanted them to produce, because they've got hundreds of thousands of hits on one article, you know, and it's just a guy coming in and guesting. It's not a writer for that particular paper and that sort of stuff. And I understand that.
But there's an ethical line there.
There's got to be, and that's the problem. There's a sacrifice of that. You know, your objectivity, but also your moral standards. Yeah, that certain businesses are willing to cross in order to get the results, and they don't care what people think of them. And you can see that the lack of disciplinary things or the lack of fallout on their end shows that they don't really care.
But it's cheap. And it's nasty.
Yeah.
And in some regards, it's been particularly vicious. And I know we don't want to go on naming names or anything, but it has been. It's been particularly vicious. And I think there's been 2 cases in this season of individuals, former footballers, misrepresenting the truth on radio stations because they've worked themselves into such a tizzy over Rangers. And I think, I understand that there's always going to be a feistiness to Scottish football, and there's always going to be a kind of partisanship, and there's always going to be rivalry, and there's always going to be everything. But much of the negative stuff is being driven by them, and I think that it misrepresents the actual truth, because aside from this, we also do the podcast Boys v Blue Noses. We're sitting there with 2 Celtic fans discussing stuff with them like ordinary people, like most people in their day-to-day life, and the way that this is kind of stirred, it drives like a real kind of poison, and it feels to me like this kind of coverage is adhering to the fringes of the Scottish football and support, and I don't think it's particularly healthy for the game here, and I don't think that it's particularly healthy for supporters. And I can understand why people get so upset, and I can understand why people get so frustrated, because at times it upsets and frustrates me as a supporter, and I don't want to see it. And I think the club are right, and I think that Shareholders Club 1872 are right to bring this up, because you have to hit them where it hurts. And at the same time as you're discussing the commercial impact that such a negative, sensational story can have. If you say, fine, we're just going to remove it, then we're going to have to remove the information that we give you that gives you a commercial advantage. Then it hurts them that way. So then they're making a rod for their own back.
I think the problem as well, though, is that you were not necessarily the fans, the outcry and stuff on social media. People aren't taking exception to how a journalist from an actual paper does a match report on Rangers. It's the columnists outside of all that. So what's actually happening for the guys who are being led into the ground on a weekly basis isn't necessarily inherently flawed. Mm-hmm. But it's the other stuff around it, but they're all representing the same organisation, and that's a problem where things get crossed over. But there's no way that, Rangers as a football club could see themselves or, just in the environment and say, look, we're not letting other people in, we're just letting people in who like this club or have a leaning towards this club. Like you simply can't do that.
It's unrealistic.
But so there's a question mark about that sort of stuff in terms of, because I think fan groups in a lot or sites that have a lean or a specific focus like ours, who specifically focus on Rangers, in terms of the knowledge of the people writing about those things is normally very good, because that's what we're dealing in on a daily basis. But it's a leap for those clubs to let that new media or the non-traditional media into things. So we've been fine, like youth games and stuff like that, which doesn't get as much coverage. You don't have people from the other papers, that's fine. And the Atletico Madrid game, Rangers were brilliant, and I was there last week, and that's fine. It's just that step, so I can do that, talk to Graham Murray afterwards, and it's brilliant. But then it's the step up to being like, you're going to be there in the press box on a weekly basis, and we're going to let you in, and does that reflect badly on us? But I think if stuff keeps going the way it is going over a certain amount of time, they're going to have to show that the mainstream media have to compete with other people. But yeah,
I think there's a feasibility to that, though. I think it's a 50-50 thing. I don't think this is just about Rangers. I think that we're discussing it with regards Rangers because of all the negativity surrounding the press coverage. But if you think theoretically around the world, there's going to be professional fan media coverage, which is going to begin to get more coverage than perhaps even national tabloids or national papers. I mean, even down south or in Europe or in South America or in anywhere. So I think that this is perhaps a media phenomenon that's happening around sports. And I think that it won't just happen at Rangers. I think there is a feeling for me that there's an inevitability to fan media eventually, professional fan media eventually getting a level of insight and access that perhaps it wouldn't have before, away from like traditional media, etc. But I don't think it'll be an overhaul. But I do think football as a whole will go through this kind of mini media revolution.
I think that's fair.
I think it is. But I think with Rangers, the debate's been kind of sped up because of what's been happening in the background.
Yeah, it's probably a natural progression, but as you say, once one club does it, then it's normalised. But it's a big thing for Rangers to say, "Oh, we're going to take this step on our own."
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's totally fair.